Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Glasgow Times News Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW. Or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information at CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcast and give us any constructive feedback.
From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 30th of September 2022, from the news section. Bomb found at building site near Glasgow was dropped by plane during Second World War. A bomb which sparked a safety alert after it was discovered at a Barrhead building site is believed to have been dropped by a plane during the Second World War. The unexploded device was unearthed at Taylor Wimpey's new Duncarnock housing development in Springfield Road at around 10 a.m. yesterday. It prompted the closure of the railway line between Neilston and Muirend, as the bomb, thought to be around the size of a fire extinguisher, was found near the tracks, with services not resuming until around 6 p.m. Police were called to the scene, where scores of new houses are being built, and set up a cordon for safety reasons. Members of the Explosive Ordnance Disposal (EOD) unit were also alerted and later carried out a controlled explosion. The sprawling Duncarnock site has a number of unoccupied houses, but properties at one end of the development which are already occupied were not evacuated. Taylor Wimpey said the bomb was found by ground workers at the development. A spokesperson added, "The Ministry of Defence, MOD, were called to carry out a controlled explosion to safely remove the ordnance from the site. Our first priority is the safety of our employees and subcontractors, as well as the general public in the surrounding area." Following advice from the police, MOD and a specialist consultant, appropriate safety measures were put in place to allow them to deal with the unexploded ordnance safely, and work has been cleared to resume on site. ScotRail organised replacement buses for train passengers affected by the disruption. Police confirmed that a road closure took place and a cordon was enforced while the device was dealt with. A spokesperson said, "Police received a report of an unexploded ordnance having been found at a construction site on Springfield Road at around 10:05 a.m. on Thursday, September the 29th. And that article was unattributed. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 30th of September 2022, from the news section. Glasgow perv, 21, groped woman, 71, in dark and told her he needed sex. By Connor Gordon. A pervert groped a 71-year-old woman in the dark and told her that he needed sex. Kieran Sullivan pounced on the terrified pensioner near her home in Glasgow's Kinning Park on December the 30th last year. The 21-year-old grabbed both breasts as the woman was sweeping leaves for her neighbour. He shouted at her, "I need a S, asterisk, 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 I need an S, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk." The brave victim was able to push Sullivan away before he fled the scene. Sullivan was also snared for performing earlier sex acts on himself in public. He pleaded guilty today at the Glasgow Sheriff Court to 2 charges of sexual assault. Sullivan also admitted 3 charges of engaging in sexual activity in the presence of others. The court heard the elderly woman was outside sweeping leaves for her neighbour while it was dark. Prosecutor Emma Barker said, "Sullivan grabbed her from behind, held both breasts with his hands initially, and put his right hand over her mouth. Sullivan pressed himself up against her and stated, 'I need an S, expletive deleted, I need a S, expletive deleted.' The woman grabbed Sullivan's hands and pushed him off, where he ran out of sight. She contacted the police while she was extremely shaken and frightened. Sullivan was chased hours later following a chase when he was arrested. The court heard of an earlier incident that day in which Sullivan was caught performing a sex act on himself while looking into a stranger's living room window. He did a similar act on Christmas Day 2021 while looking into an office window for city centre homeless accommodation. Sullivan also groped a care worker in the TV room of the accommodation in January 2020 before stating, "I know you want this." The terrified 51-year-old locked herself in an office after the incident and died in 999. The hearing further was told that Sullivan performed a sex act on himself at Kelvingrove Park in the presence of 23 and 19-year-old women. Sentence was deferred pending background reports until next month by Sheriff Matthew Jackson KC. Sullivan, who appeared from custody, had his remand continued and was put on the sex offenders register meantime. And that report was by Connor Gordon. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 30th of September 2022, from the news section, Glasgow police officer sobs in dock after he is cleared of sex attack, by Connor Gordon. A police officer sobbed as he was cleared of sexually assaulting a woman in her home. The Alexin Aloysius, 28, was accused of attacking the 42-year-old in Glasgow's Rockhill on September the 2nd, 2020. The suspended officer, based out of the city's Maryhill, had initially returned to the woman's missing teenage daughter. He visited the woman again at her flat later that morning. It is then claimed that Aloysius attempted to kiss her before groping her. The woman stated the alleged incident had made her lose faith in the police system. Aloysius, meantime, claimed that he was a good Samaritan to deviate from standard procedure to go back to the flat to help her report what he believed would be a domestic matter. He later stated, "I stand by it, I chose with my heart." Aloysius denied any sexual contact with the woman. He stated that his only contact was to separate her and her daughter during a row, as well as putting his hands out when she went to hug him. The jury returned not proven verdict today to the single charge of sexual assault while off duty. A separate identical on-duty sexual assault charge was deleted by the prosecutor midway through the trial. Aloysius cried as he left the dock, following his acquittal by Sheriff Joan Kerr. And that piece was by Connor Gordon. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 30th of September 2022, from the news section, latest on new Glasgow prison for women revealed in council meeting, by Sarah Hilley. A new safe Glasgow prison for women is due to open in Maryhill in October, with inmates living in house-style homes. Prisoners are set to have their own bedrooms and will be supported to live independently, doing their own laundry and housekeeping. There will be no bars on windows or high fences, and it is to be very different from female prison Cordon Vale. The unit aims to reduce reoffending and prepare the women better for the release date so that they can successfully reintegrate back into the community. A total of 24 women will stay at the community custody unit, which is called the Lilius Centre. Initially, there will be about 4 women staying in the Maryhill unit. Glasgow City's Integration Joint Board approved the future recruitment of staff for the unit at its meeting this week. Praising the new unit, former Church Minister Reverend John Matthews said, "I have dealt with women coming out of Cordon Vale. I am so pleased this is going ahead. Well done." Pat Tucker of Glasgow's Health and Social Care Partnership described the new unit as an ambitious and extensive piece of work. Speaking at the meeting, John Ferguson called for a similar facility for men and described female jail Cordon Vale as a luxury camp compared to the prison for males. Councillor Chris Cunningham, SNP, said he accepts the point, but approaches need to be tailored accordingly for women. He pointed out that the meeting agenda was about discussing the unit for women. Cordon Vale is set to close and be replaced by a new facility in Stirling. The only other community custody unit in Scotland opened in Dundee in August, called the Bella Centre. The Glasgow Maryhill Custody Unit is set to cost £282,334 to operate between October and March, and £547,499 to run during the financial year 2023 to 2024. It was due to be based on the site of the former Maryhill Health Centre. Margaret McCarthy voiced concern about how staffing the new unit could put pressure on teams resourcing at the Integration Joint Board meeting. Suzanne Miller, Chief Officer of Glasgow City Health and Social Care Partnership, said she is confident it can be staffed safely. The Scottish Prison Service said the units in Dundee and Glasgow will be unlike any existing facility in the prison estate. It said, the women will live in shared house-style accommodation with shared facilities downstairs and bedrooms upstairs. It will blend into the surrounding community. There will be no bars on the windows, no barbed wire or high fences that you might associate with a prison. Every woman allocated to a community custody unit will have undergone a robust risk and assessment process. They will accommodate women of mixed custodial sentence lengths, and women will, following appropriate risk assessments, have the opportunity to access the community. Living in the CCU will enable these women to foster stronger and closer links with the appropriate community support agencies they will be working with prior to release. A paper presented to the Integration Joint Board said, it will provide safe accommodation for 24 women currently in prison, with a focus on meeting the needs of women in prison, whilst promoting closer community contact and access to local services. It is anticipated that this new approach to women in prison will create sustained stability for women in preparation for successful reintegration back into the community. The meeting heard the new type of prison is based on evidence that it is effective. And that report was by Sarah Hilley. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 30th of September 2022, from the news section, sex shame minister given job working with students at prestigious Glasgow University, by Katrina Stewart. Concerns have been raised after a former Kirk minister, who was sacked after having an affair with a parishioner and masturbating in front of a colleague, was employed to work with overseas exchange students. Dr. Elijah Smith was removed from his Glasgow parish in disgrace in 2019 after a Church of Scotland investigation established he had begun an affair with a married congregant shortly into his post, abused his girlfriend, had an affair with a teenager, and fondled himself in front of a Kirk staff member. However, it emerged that the 35-year-old had been employed by the University of Glasgow as an administrator in the School of Social and Political Science, working with overseas Erasmus students. It is believed that the university was not aware of Smith's past when he began the role several weeks ago. Smith was listed on the university's staff directory on Monday of this week, but by Wednesday afternoon, following contact from her sister titled The Herald, the page had been removed and a spokeswoman said Smith was not employed by the university. A former parishioner from the Glasgow church where Smith was minister praised the university for its swift response, but expressed concern that he was able to successfully manoeuvre it through the organisation's recruitment process. The woman, who asked not to be named, said, Elijah's name is eminently searchable. A quick Google check brings up a wealth of stories detailing exactly what his history is. As a Christian, I believe in forgiveness and in second chances. However, I am not convinced that a role working with teenagers and young women, particularly those far from home, is a suitable or positive first step. A University of Glasgow spokesperson said, the University of Glasgow has robust recruitment processes in place. We take any issues raised with us very seriously, investigate them thoroughly, and act accordingly. We cannot comment on individual cases. In 2019, the Church of Scotland published a report detailing the findings of a Presbyterial Commission which investigated allegations of multiple sexual transgressions while ordained as a minister of Queen's Park Govanhill Parish Church. Originally from California, Smith took up the post in Glasgow's South Side in January 2015 and, within a month, had entered into an affair with a parishioner who had sought spiritual support during her divorce. Although she was separated, the woman was technically still married and had told Smith she was in a dark place and in need of help. A second former parishioner said the incident had brought back difficult memories of what she was a scandalising time for the close-knit community church. She said, this was very difficult for everyone involved at the time, particularly the women who were intimately involved with Elijah. It's disturbing to me that he was able to take up posts in this sort of environment, and to others I've spoken to who are aware of the situation. I'm glad he's been removed from post, and I acknowledge this must be hard for him too. It is unsavoury for everyone involved. A woman whose evidence was heard when the decision was made to remove him from his role at Queen's Park Govanhill Parish Church said she was pleased with the decision to remove him. She said, Whilst I have only recently become aware that Elijah had been employed at Glasgow University, I am pleased that they have come to the decision to remove him from post. I hope this move reflects an ongoing commitment to protecting students from those with a proven history of abuse, sending a strong message that those who misuse positions of authority, trust or responsibility to their own ends are not welcome on Glasgow University campus. Smith, who was the church's second youngest minister at the time, also began an affair with a teenage neighbour of the woman with whom he was in a long-term relationship. He also began sending deeply personal messages on Facebook to his girlfriend's friend before meeting the woman in a pub, where they hugged and kissed. The report detailed how the pair exchanged explicit text messages and that Smith slept over at her home. The former minister, who has a doctorate from St Andrews University, said in mitigation that he had Asperger's syndrome and wrote a blog post about his actions, claiming that he often misinterprets what he is told. It was found that Smith had emotionally and verbally abused his partner. A church colleague who went to the manse to ask Smith to take time away from the parish also detailed how he became visibly aroused while playing guitar and began masturbating in front of her. At the conclusion of the investigation, which spanned 11 charges from 2015 to 2018, the church removed Smith's status as a minister. He later went on to set up a crowdfunder to help with home office fees while applying for a UK visa, and offered to tutor donors in knitting, playing the banjo or guitar, or lessons in Adobe Creative Suite. The online appeal also said, "Maybe none of these supposed incentives appeal to you. I'm sure we can work something out. Cycling lessons, singing lessons, playtime with Carol, even with my limited skill set. Unskilled manual labour is definitely an option." Smith said he was looking to raise £3,000 to help pay for food, rent and monthly bills after the visa application process took a sizable chunk of his savings. In a statement in 2019, when he was sacked from the church, he said, "I have no ill will toward anyone, including my accusers. I want peace for everyone involved, and I want to continue to survive and build some sort of meaningful life. In doing so, my true character will be proven." And that article is by Catriona Stewart. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 30th of September 2022, from the news section, Usdaw union staff strike against own employer in Glasgow, by Catriona Stewart. One of the UK's largest trade unions has seen strike action from its own staff in a dispute over pay and conditions. Usdaw workers, who are members of the GMB union, picketed at sites across the UK yesterday, including the body's headquarters at Glasgow's south side. Staff are calling for an increase on a proposed 3.5% pay deal and are requesting a blended working model is implemented to allow them to work from home. Union members on the picket line declined to comment, but a GMB spokesman said, "GMB supports its members taking action in this dispute and remain hopeful of a swift and renegotiated settlement." Negotiations have been underway since May, but broke down earlier this month, prompting a ballot for industrial action. Usdaw, the union of shop, distributive and allied workers, said the total pay deal, when salary contribution is accounted for, amounts to 11%. The dispute involves around 100 of the union's 400 staff. Usdaw General Secretary Paddy Lillis said, "I'm really disappointed that things have come to this. The GMB balloted on the pay offer and on the issue of introducing some form of home working, but for me, home working is an issue of policy and there's a lot to think about and potential extra investment required. I asked for it to be set aside from the wage claim so we can look at it at some future point." Mr Lillis said the last 2 years have been difficult and challenging and added, "We need to ensure our reps and my members get the best possible support going forward, with my main priority being to get this union back firing on all cylinders." Usdaw has previously said it lost 70,000 members during the pandemic. And that report is by Catriona Stewart.
This article is from the Glasgow Times, date 30th September 2022, from the opinion section. Maths can be found everywhere and anywhere, by Sheena MacDonald. Let's talk numbers. I wonder how many of us have uttered the words, "Maths is beautiful." The hope is that by the end of a dedicated week of events and activities run by Maths Week Scotland, it will be a considerable lot more. This annual festival has been running since 2017 and helps to raise awareness of numeracy and mathematics inside and outside the classroom. This year's theme is the beauty of maths, and it has been inspiring participation all over Scotland from September 26th to October 2nd. The aim is to make us maths positive as a nation and encourage people to be enthusiastic about maths. Everyday maths. I have long suspected my own negative relationship with mathematics stemmed from my poor secondary school performance in the subject rather than a lack of appreciation for numbers. Jump forward to now, more years than I care to count, and I must relent that the maths teachers were right when they said maths is in everything. It really is. It would be nearly impossible to go a whole day without using maths. When you rely on the alarm to wake you up in the morning or measure the optimum amount of coffee, you're using maths. When you catch a train, when you're working out how much time it will take to get to your destination, when you are food shopping, you'll be adding up costs, making decisions on value, and looking at sell-by dates. You can see a pattern here. Patterns. That's maths too. Community participation. Glasgow Science Centre is running a series of workshops throughout Maths Week for community members and their families. We are showing how maths and numeracy can be fun for adults and children alike. How do we plan to do that? Well, creatively, of course. Taking the theme beauty as inspiration, we're setting out how to demonstrate how maths appears in our everyday lives, as well as its influence on art and culture. Katie Oldfield, Maths Week Scotland coordinator, said, "We are thrilled to be launching Maths Week Scotland for its 6th consecutive year and to be involved in these fantastic activities at Glasgow Science Centre. After 2 years of a more restricted programme due to COVID-19, we're so excited to be bringing back more interactive in-person events." Mathematicians often refer to the subject as beautiful, and our aim is to inspire families, schools and community groups in Glasgow to view maths in a new way and to find it in unexpected places such as art and music. We hope that this year's activities will enthuse even more people as they discover how creative maths can be. Maths in music and art. We probably rarely consider maths when listening to our favourite tunes, but counting a beat, rhythm, harmonies and pitch are all connected to maths. Without maths, neuroscientists would not have discovered that Queen's "Don't Stop Me Now" was the most mathematically pleasing song. Maths has long been associated with art. Both artists and mathematicians use geometry, shapes, symmetry and proportion in their work. Painters use perspective, sculptors rely on measurement, and architects couldn't design without algebra, trigonometry, or probability and statistics. Evidence from brain scans shows that looking at complex mathematical formulae can evoke the same sense of beauty as artistic masterpieces and music from the greatest composers. When mathematicians rated a formula for its beauty, the higher the rating, the greater the activity in the emotional centres of the brain. Maths in nature. You may never have heard of the Fibonacci sequence, but it's an interesting set of numbers. Let me explain. The next number in the sequence is found by adding up the two numbers before it. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on infinitely. In celebration of this wonderful numerical pattern, Glasgow Science Centre introduced a Fibonacci garden in our newly transformed outside space, which has become a focal point for visiting guests and passers-by. Beauty in Maths. During our Maths Week sessions, we are overseeing the creation of a community-led art project inspired by the Fibonacci sequence and introducing participants to the golden ratio. This is related to the Fibonacci sequence and is considered the very essence of beauty. I can't wait to see the beautiful results. If you're interested in finding out about this project, we'll be sharing details on our website. That article was by Sheena MacDonald of Glasgow Science Centre.
Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng scraps 45p tax rate cut ahead of Tory conference. An article written by Rebecca Carey. Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has announced that the controversial 45p tax rate cut will be scrapped ahead of his Conservative Party conference speech later today. The Chancellor released a statement on Twitter ahead of his appearance on BBC Breakfast on Monday morning. Mr Kwarteng confirmed that the tax cut for people earning more than £150,000 would be scrapped just 10 days after it was announced in the mini-budget. The U-turn comes after several Tory MPs voiced their opposition to the plan as the Tory party conference continues. Former Cabinet Ministers Michael Gove and Grant Shapps criticised the income tax cut for people earning more than £150,000 at a time when millions of people struggle with a rising cost of living. In his statement on Twitter, Mr Kwarteng said, "From supporting British business to lowering the tax burden for the lowest paid, our growth plan sets out a new approach to build a more prosperous economy. However, it's clear that the abolition of the 45p tax rate has become a distraction from our overriding mission to tackle challenges facing our country. As a result, I'm announcing that I am not proceeding with the abolition of the 45p tax rate. We get it, and we have listened. This will allow us to focus on delivering the major parts of our growth package." The Chancellor continued in his statement, "First, our energy price guarantee, which will support households and businesses with their energy bills. Second, cutting taxes to put money back in the pockets of 30 million hard-working people and grow our economy. Third, driving supply-side reforms, including accelerating major infrastructure projects to get Britain moving." Prime Minister Liz Truss has also been criticised for singling Mr Kwarteng out as responsible for the tax cut. Speaking on the BBC's Laura Koonsberg, Ms Truss said on Sunday that it was a decision the Chancellor made, rather than one debated by the entire Cabinet. Following Monday morning's statement, Mr Kwarteng will speak at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham today. The speech will be keenly watched across the country following the U-turn. He's expected to make the address around 4 o'clock, shortly before the markets close. Mr Kwarteng was expected to say that the Conservative Party needed to stay the course and back his plan for tax cuts in the face of a mounting Tory revolt. However, the Sun newspaper had reported earlier that Prime Minister Liz Truss was preparing to ditch the plans after talks with Mr Kwarteng following the backlash. The Chancellor is likely to elaborate on the government's growth plan and the energy price guarantee, further tax cuts, as well as supply-side reforms. An article written by Rebecca Carey. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Fake carer conned his way into a job at a third Glasgow care home. An exclusive front-page article written by Amanda Keenan. A man convicted of scamming his way into jobs at 2 Glasgow care homes reportedly carried out a similar con at another before he was snared by the authorities. The Glasgow Times can today reveal that Victor Nwaka, who was 41, allegedly worked at a third city centre care home looking after vulnerable residents, despite having no legal basis to be in the UK. A whistleblower at the facility told how she was sickened after reading about Mr. Nwaka's string of deceit in our pages and realised she'd already worked alongside him. We told last week how Mr. Nwaka had pleaded guilty at Glasgow Sheriff Court to 2 charges of obtaining employment by fraud at nursing homes in Drumchapel and Bridgeton between March 2020 and the following February, by using false documents in concert with forged French and Maltese passports under an alias of Mamoudou Di. After reading the story in the Glasgow Times, the woman, whose identity we're protecting, revealed how she became suspicious after working with the scammer at another Glasgow care home in 2019. She said, "He started as a care assistant and I was responsible for his induction. It soon became very clear that he had no previous experience, despite claiming to have had some. When I was trying to show him how we worked, he would say things like, 'I don't need to know about this,' or 'I don't really care about what you're telling me.' His attitude was very poor, and it was pretty obvious he had no real interest in the job, which when you are caring for people is unacceptable. He was very dismissive, rude and evasive if I asked any questions about his life outside work. The carer said Mr. Nwaka was never physically abusive, but she added, 'Something right away didn't sit right with me, and I had real doubts about his character and background that he'd put forward. He lasted about 6 months or so, and then we never saw him again. I thought maybe he'd left the care profession, but I was sick when I saw him exposed by the Glasgow Times. Basically, he's just a con man and an absolute disgrace to this profession. Proper checks should have been carried out to make sure he was never able to work with vulnerable residents. His lies could have put people's well-being at risk.' Mr. Nwaka was living in the city's Royston when information received by the Home Office that he was working as a care assistant using a false identity. Glasgow Sheriff Court heard how he applied for and was successful in finding work with HC1, which operates care homes in the UK. The court also heard how a false letter from the Department of Work and Pensions, a national security number and Disclosure Scotland certificates were entered into the online portal. Prosecutor Hannah Terrence added, "There's no suggestion that any of the care that Mr. Nwaka provided was substandard or that there were any disciplinary issues during the course of his employment he obtained through false pretences." The whistleblower says Mr. Nwaka's case shows real failings within the sector. She added, "I think it's appalling that he was able to secure employment at so many care homes so easily. If it was my relative in one of the places he worked, I'd be demanding answers. I hope lessons are learnt from this and hiring policies are reviewed to stop this from ever happening again." Sentence was deferred pending background reports until November by Sheriff Matthew Jackson, KC. Mr. Nwaka remains on bail meantime. When contacted by the Glasgow Times, the care home said it would not specifically comment on our inquiry, but that no court or law enforcement authority had been in touch regarding Mr. Nwaka. The spokesperson stressed that the care home has a robust system in place for recruiting staff, adding, "We cover all the safe recruitment practice and guidance as we're required to do in all cases. We never deviate from this practice and our recruitment system is robust. We also put all of our recruits through a rigorous induction process." A spokesperson for the Care Inspectorate said, "We're aware of the situation and are in contact with the services. We'll use the information gathered as appropriate to inform our future scrutiny work." An article written by Amanda Keenan. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Football team in bid to take over community centre. An article written by Lauren Brownlee. A local football team is hoping to take over a sports centre in Glasgow. Drumchapel United currently has a licence to run the football operations of the Donald Dewar Centre, but hope to take full control in a phased approach over the coming years. As part of this, the club has committed significant financial resources to upgrade the existing facility and develop the grounds extensively. The decision is set to be made at a Glasgow City Council hearing later this year. Carol Monaghan, MP for Glasgow North West, has given her full support to the club, which currently has more than 700 children in its setup, including 200 girls, supported by 130 coaches. In addition to the football setup, the club has been heavily involved within the community by participating in community cleanups, food bank drops and supporting local care facilities. Ms Monaghan said, after reading the club's proposal and meeting with management, it's clear they have an exciting vision for the future of the Donald Dewar Centre. It's also highly encouraging to see a local organisation in a position to significantly invest in a facility that will benefit all of the local community. I'm fully supportive of Drumchapel United's proposal and encourage Glasgow City Council to proceed with it when it comes to the committee hearing. The club has been a force for good in the local area for several years, and I have no doubt, should these proposals be accepted, it would allow them to scale up their existing community activities. An article written by Lauren Brownlee. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Glasgow's Vintage Vehicle Trust hosts an open day. An article written by Marissa McWhirter. A weekend-long event celebrating Glasgow's golden age of public transport is set to take place this month. Glasgow Vintage Vehicle Trust's annual open weekend will welcome thousands of visitors on October the 8th and October the 9th for a weekend filled with vintage automobiles, vehicle restoration and free trips on a vintage bus. The free services and tours featuring more than 30 classic buses will give visitors the opportunity to step back in time and enjoy a taste of vintage Glasgow. The event will be hosted at the Bridgeton Bus Garage with the Trust's collection of 130 classic buses, lorries and fire engines, as well as guest vehicles from across the UK. The corner of the garage will be transformed into a trading village with stalls selling models, pictures, books and transport souvenirs. Stephen Booth, chair of the Trust, said, "This is our showpiece event of the year with something to appeal to everyone, from children to grandparents and from the general public to the keen enthusiast. We pull out all the stops on our bus service and themed excursions, a real chance to go on a nostalgic trip. We can't wait to open the doors and welcome everyone in." An article written by Marissa McWhirter. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. City woman is face of Adidas campaign for Breast Cancer Month. An article written by Nicole Mitchell. A Glasgow woman has become the face of a new Adidas collection in a campaign for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The new global campaign, Strength in Nature, has been launched in partnership with Breast Cancer Now to help raise awareness of breast cancer and support the vital work carried out by the charity. 3 women with different breast cancer experiences have been selected by Adidas to tell their stories in the new campaign, including Jane Grove from the city's West End. Jane was diagnosed with breast cancer during the pandemic in September 2020 and had a mastectomy in December 2020 before having chemotherapy and radiotherapy early last year. She used outdoor exercise as a way of staying positive throughout. The 53-year-old said, "My biggest fear, apart from the possibility of dying, was that treatments would make it difficult for me to run and get out for dog walks, essential for my mood and particularly as chemo took me straight into menopause. The prospect of it not being something I would continue to do didn't bear thinking about." Jane lost half a stone before her surgery to improve her chances of a good recovery and to prepare herself for chemotherapy. She walked her dog for 10 kilometres a day, and 10 days after her surgery she walked 5 kilometres for the Beatson Santa Dash. Jane said, "I found it important to stay active throughout chemotherapy and found that moving just a little helped with the mental impact of cancer treatment. I remember being so elated on a rainy evening in March as I walked through the park. I looked around to see that nobody was nearby and whipped off my hat to feel the cooling rain soothing my poor bald head. It was fantastic." Jane had a supportive group of friends and a running group who were there for her when she was at her toughest points of treatment. She said, "When I was feeling really low, I hadn't made it out of the door all day, let alone along to our Wednesday evening Mums on the Run, and they called by my street during their run to wave and sing to me. I had to steer clear of the group for months due to lowered immunity, so that was so emotional. Being part of the Adidas and Breast Cancer Now Strength in Nature campaign feels so important, as I'm not sure what I would have done without having access to nature during my treatment." The feeling of well-being that I gain from being outdoors can't be overstated, and the weather, the seasons, they all played a part in my journey to recovery. That's why it's lovely that Adidas and Breast Cancer Now are encouraging everyone to get outdoors, regardless of your abilities. I don't aspire to be a gazelle, I'm a lumpy trier, but the benefits of just that small time in nature can do so much for anyone's physical and mental well-being. The Adidas Breast Cancer Awareness Collection brings together a range of footwear and apparel for running, hiking and mountain biking, with £15 from each full-price sale donated to Breast Cancer Now to fund vital support services. The products have been chosen to help everyone, regardless of physical ability or condition, spend more time outdoors. The limited collection is available until the end of this month. An article written by Nicole Mitchell. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Great Scottish Run sees thousands come out for race. An article written by Lauren Brownlee. The Great Scottish Run returned to Glasgow this weekend for the first time in 3 years, as more than 20,000 runners took to the city's streets. Participants started the 10 kilometres and half-marathon races in George Square and soaked up the atmosphere, music and legendary Glaswegian support all the way to the finish line in Glasgow Green yesterday. 2 of Scotland's star athletes were on hand to set the pace in the 10k and half-marathon. Triple Olympian Eilish McColgan made her debut Great Scottish Run one to remember. She broke her own 10k record with a time of 30 minutes and 18 seconds. Meanwhile, Callum Hawkins, the Scottish marathon record holder from Elderslie, took first place in the men's half-marathon. His brother Derek came in third place. On Saturday, more than 1,200 young runners took part in the Junior, Mini Great Scottish Run and Toddler Dash. Some of the city's best-loved charity mascots also took part in a competitive 100-metre dash. Paul Foster, chief executive of the Great Run Company, said, "We're so happy to be back in Glasgow after 3 years of cancellations due to the pandemic. It was incredible to see 20,000 runners of all ages and abilities on the city streets this weekend. Some were running for charity, some for the challenge. The Great Scottish Run has something for everyone, from elite runners to complete beginners. At the front of the field, Eilish McColgan has set a British women's 10k record for a mixed race, and at the other end of the scale we had over 1,200 children enjoying their own sprint to the finish line in the Saturday events in George Square. The people of Glasgow always give our runners an incredible welcome and support them right along the course. The atmosphere was absolutely incredible. I'd like to thank everyone who took part, whether running, volunteering or spectating, and we hope to see you all again next year." Glasgow Lord Provost Jacqueline McLaren added, "Glasgow has earned an international reputation for being an outstanding destination for sports events and a superb host city. It also has a strong track record of encouraging active participation in sports. The Great Scottish Run really is a perfect example of all of that, inspiring and encouraging people of all ages to get involved and to keep running." An article written by Lauren Brownlee. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Impact of cost of living crisis in Glasgow revealed. An article written by Stuart Patterson. 1 in 5 households in Scotland have reported going cold or hungry because they can no longer afford the essentials, according to new research. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation found people were forced to spend less on food and heating and were skipping meals. Challenge Poverty Week starts today with campaigning to highlight the scale of the problem and calls for governments to eradicate poverty. In the report, Glasgow woman Grace said, "I've had to reduce food intake. We make one meal for everyone. You take what you need and no more. We can't waste one drop. I check the bin and plates to make sure no one is leaving any food." Laura, who's also from the city, stated, "When I think of the hike in the gas and electricity, it terrifies me, and thinking of my children coming home getting cold and needing to wrap up gives me anxiety." The researchers found people reported reduced spending on food for both adults and children. They also discovered people have changed the type of food their household buys, heated their home less than they needed to or less often. They have not replaced clothing that's outgrown or worn, and had skipped or cut down the size of a meal. They found people had reduced spending on transport and changed the way they cook, for example, used the oven less. They used appliances, including washing machines, dishwashers and microwaves, less often, and reduced the number of showers or baths taken in their house. Many have not replaced broken items and have stopped or reduced socialising with friends and family. Also, parents have taken children out of nursery or childminding and reduced spending on their children's activities and hobbies. The report stated, this cost of living crisis is not just caused by increasing costs. The incomes of low-income households have been intentionally reduced by a decade of reductions in social security support, leaving households at the mercy of rising energy bills and wider inflation. A fact now brought into stark contrast by a recent budget that cut taxes for some of the wealthiest people in society. Without further government support, this winter and 2023 will be etched into the memories of families across Scotland. Deep scars will be caused by hunger, cold and trauma. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation called on governments to provide immediate action to protect low-income households from the unaffordable costs in the coming months. An article written by Stuart Patterson. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Pupils targeted by vile racists. An article written by Rebecca Newlands. Nicola Sturgeon has condemned vile racists who posted offensive comments about pupils online after she visited a Glasgow school. Scotland's First Minister retweeted a picture of herself with pupils at St Albert's Primary in Pollokshields on Friday during a visit to mark the end of Climate Week. Miss Sturgeon tweeted her support for the primary school after it later said it had been subjected to the most horrific racist abuse. In a statement posted on social media, St Albert's Primary said, "After an exciting day celebrating our success with our First Minister, we've been subject to the most horrific racist abuse. We're proud to serve our community, proud of our children who demonstrate the best of Scotland." Miss Sturgeon retweeted the statement saying, "Every brilliant young person and every member of staff at St Albert's is worth 1,000,000 and more of the vile racists who hurl abuse at them. It's my privilege to represent the wonderful, multi-ethnic, multicultural south side of Glasgow. I stand with them, always." The First Minister had visited St Albert's Primary School to take part in a virtual assembly led by Keep Scotland Beautiful and to hear about the children's daily life lessons on climate-related topics. The statement tweeted by the school also said, "Our motto is creating conscience-led communities. We will continue to embed this in all our practice. We urge all our colleagues to embrace equity in all policy and practice and stand as active allies with anti-racist and culturally responsive practice. We're sending love and hope it touches the hearts of those who live in hate. Thank you for your support." Others also tweeted their support, including Scottish Greens co-leader and Glasgow MSP Patrick Harvey, who said, "Solidarity with the pupils and staff at St Albert's who have been subjected to a torrent of racist abuse." Scottish Labour leader and Glasgow MSP Anna Sawa tweeted, "Sending love and solidarity, no place for hate or racism, regardless of who it's from or who it is to." An article written by Rebecca Newlands. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Cop who snared Peter Tobin says he'll take his secrets to his grave. An article written by Amanda Keenan. The detective who snared Scotland's most notorious serial killer believes he will never reveal the true number of lives he took. David Swindle fears evil Peter Tobin, who's suspected of a string of other brutal murders all across the UK, will take his secrets to the grave. Mr. Tobin's health is deteriorating in hospital as he's ravaged by cancer, while he's also suffered a broken hip. Despite knowing his time is running out, he's continued to ignore desperate pleas by victims' families to come clean about the true catalogue of crimes he's committed. The 76-year-old is serving life for the murders of Angelica Cluck, Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol. Mr. Swindle, who led Operation Anagram, which delved into Peter Tobin's crimes, told the Glasgow Times, "We know he's responsible for other murders, but we just need the evidence. He only cares about himself and is incapable of thinking of others." Much like child killer Ian Brady, who went to his grave without revealing where he buried his last victims, Mr. Tobin is likely to do the same. It's all about the power and control he thinks it gives him. He will die, and my hope is he finally finds a crumb of decency to tell the families of those he killed what he did and reveal what he did with their bodies. But I doubt Mr. Tobin is capable of thinking of anyone apart from himself. He's never showed any remorse for his crimes, not an ounce. He's only interested in himself and doesn't care about his victims or the heartbreak he's caused. Peter Tobin's crimes finally came to light after he was convicted of the brutal killing of Angelica Kluck, who was 23 and was bludgeoned to death and stabbed 16 times. Her blood-soaked body was dumped through a hatch in the chapel floorboards at St Patrick's Roman Catholic Church in Glasgow city centre. She was hidden next to the confessional box with her hands bound and mouth gagged. She befriended Mr. Tobin, who was working as a handyman at the church after being released from jail for sexually assaulting 2 14-year-old girls. But unbeknown to Angelica, the remains of 2 teens who vanished in 1991 were buried in the garden of his former home in Margate in Kent. 5 days later, Mr. Swindle, who at that time was a detective superintendent with Strathclyde Police, visited the church where Angelica's body had been discovered, sparking his connection to the serial killer that has lasted to this day. Mr. Swindle worked on hundreds of murders and complex high-profile UK-wide investigations during his 34 years in the police, including his management of the Glasgow Airport terror attack. He went on to set up David Swindle Crime Solutions and Victims Abroad, supporting families whose loved ones are killed abroad as a result of homicide or in suspicious, unexplained circumstances. Now he will be giving a series of talks across Scotland, sharing his expertise and discussing prolific cases he worked on. His Catching Killers tour is coming to Oranmore in Glasgow's West End on December the 6th. He added, "I'll be discussing some of the high-profile cases I've worked on, including Peter Tobin and many more. It's an opportunity for people to get a real insight into police work and find out more about the investigations and techniques used to catch murderers. Serial killers are cunning, conniving, controlling, careful, and I hate to say it, clever individuals who live apparently normal lives and get away with their crimes for years until eventually detected." An article written by Amanda Keenan. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Photo of Stockingfield Bridge wins global competition. An article written by Rebecca Newlands. An image taken of a Glasgow bridge has won an award in a global photography competition. George McBurney's picture of the Stockingfield Junction and Bridge in the city's Lamb Hill beat entrants from all over the world to win this year's Institution of Civil Engineers, or ICE, photo competition. The stunning photo shows the North Glasgow Bridge reflected in the Forth and Clyde Canal. George, who is a senior project manager for Scottish Canals and an ICE Scotland member, said he took the picture because he wanted to capture the structure's many benefits. He also felt that it embodied this year's theme of civil engineering that has changed your life for the better. He said, "This has been a complex and challenging project which is going to be a tremendous asset to society. It has connected communities, provides active routes, protects a 200-year-old aqueduct and will enable the hosting of community arts projects." Stockingfield Bridge is a 2-way, cable-stayed pedestrian and cycle bridge which has reconnected the communities of Maryhill, Gilslough Hill and Ruckhill for the first time since 1790. It also offers a traffic-free route between Glasgow and Edinburgh. An article written by Rebecca Newlands. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 3rd of October. Probe launched after 2 patients die in Glasgow hospital waiting room. An article written by Rebecca Newlands. A probe has been launched after 2 patients died while waiting to be seen at Glasgow Hospital. The patients died from heart attacks while waiting in an accident and emergency unit at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital amid growing concerns about waiting times. The deaths occurred despite the rule that all new arrivals are seen within 15 minutes to be assessed for the seriousness of their case. It's understood the patients were in a queue, the Daily Record reports. This comes after the Royal College of Emergency Medicine warned that long waits for treatment have contributed to hundreds of avoidable deaths. Last week, Scottish Liberal Democrat leader Alex Cole-Hamilton demanded an inquiry into the number of patients who have died. He said the Scottish Liberal Democrats have called for an urgent inquiry into avoidable deaths caused by the crisis in emergency care. These tragic cases highlight exactly why that inquiry is needed. For every extra hour people wait for an ambulance or wait in A&E, there's a demonstrable risk of further fatalities like this will happen. Jackie Bailey, Scottish Labour's health spokeswoman, added, "This is obviously a tragic set of incidents that requires investigation. The Royal College of Emergency Medicine has warned the SNP government time and time again that long waiting times will lead to people losing their lives. Action must be taken by Humza Yousaf as a matter of urgency." A spokesman for Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board, which runs the hospital, said, "Our staff are working extremely hard at a time of considerable pressure, and they're doing their very best to prioritise care to patients most in need. While we can't comment on individual patients, we have clear and robust processes for reviewing the care we provide, and where issues are identified, we work closely with the relevant services to implement required changes. We work extremely hard to find solutions to staffing challenges, and we work closely with services to mitigate issues that arise and ensure as much as possible that the impact on patient care is minimised. We'd like to extend our sympathy to families who have lost a loved one. These tragic cases show why an inquiry is needed." An article written by Rebecca Newlands.
Evening Times, October 3. When Michael Jackson rocked Glasgow Green. Were you there? Report by Anne Fotheringham. Do you remember when Michael Jackson played Glasgow Green? It was August 14, 1992, 30 years ago this year, and the crowds were like nothing the city had ever seen before. More than 35,000 people turned out to welcome the King of Pop on his Dangerous tour, and there were so many noise complaints the council said he would not be welcomed back. In our sister newspaper, The Herald, the reviewer said Michael wanted to be the biggest, most strange, most distant, and yet more accessible superstar in history. So he enters, from who knows where. There are lots of traps in that stage, in a shower of sparks and phrases. Nothing happens for a very long time. Then he turns. Uproar. Nothing happens. He takes off his shades. Freak out. The show was full of dance routines, including Thriller and Billie Jean, and giant screens helped those at the back get a decent view. And the set list included all the hits, from Wanna Be Startin' Something and Smooth Criminal to She's Out of My Life, Man in the Mirror and Beat It. At the end, he appeared to leave the stage on a rocket jetpack, but the Herald was not convinced. The man is priceless, they could never afford the insurance, said the reporter. Did you see Michael at Glasgow Green? Times past would love to hear from you. Send your memories and photos to anne.fotheringham@glasgowtimes.co.uk or write to Anne Fotheringham, Glasgow Times, 125 Fullerton Drive, Glasgow, G32 8F for Freddie, G for George.
From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 4th of October 2022, from the opinion section. The Tory View. John Daly. Low emission zones could be catastrophic to the Glasgow economy. One of my first acts as a newly elected member in May was to answer the call of Glasgow's taxi drivers and their worries over council policy on low emission zones, LEZ. Iconic across UK cities, the traditional black hack taxis welcome tourists, delegates and dignitaries from across the globe. However, more importantly, they serve the citizens of Glasgow around the clock, 365 days a year, come rain or shine, a particularly important service for the disabled, the elderly and vulnerable. Yet in Glasgow, many hundreds are facing the scrap heap as a direct result of a tin-eared SNP-Green council decision not to allow them an exemption from the LEZ, due to be enforced from the 1st of June next year. Many of you will be unaware of this seemingly well-meant but unthought-through policy and its potential impact across the city. Make no mistake, this move threatens the livelihood of several hundred small businesses, from the taxi operators themselves to hospitality businesses across Glasgow who rely on taxis, particularly the night-time economy, to transport their clientele to and from their various venues. Without the confidence of how to get home, many just won't go out. This could be catastrophic to the Glasgow economy, with job losses within the taxi trade alone running into hundreds. The taxi trade argues that council policy is simply unaffordable to them. Having come through the pandemic, then into spiralling fuel costs, followed by a cost of living crisis, only to be forced into this council-made race to an LEZ, not happening in any other area of Scotland this soon, the rest of Scotland will enforce an LEZ from June 2024. It is not that the trade is unwilling to accept the transition to greener vehicles, they are simply asking for the period to be realistic and manageable. They have a point. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, has noticed that such a fast transition is logistically impossible there and has extended their clear air zone transition until the end of 2026, saying the vehicles just simply aren't available to get the change in that time frame. Meanwhile, in Glasgow, drivers have been served with a letter of notice, essentially their cards, which explain various options available to them, including grant support to convert old vehicles to alternative but marginally cleaner fossil fuels. They even mention interest-free loans available to purchase a vehicle which doesn't yet exist. The taxi trade, like all others, needs a period to recover from the pandemic, adjust to the new normal of high fuel and energy costs, as well as serving a public which is reluctant or unable to spend as much. Government at every level exists to mitigate, when it can, against situations that affect our citizens and create an environment where people and businesses can flourish. We can create a greener Glasgow and still support our taxi trade. By giving the wheelchair-accessible taxi industry the time to catch up with an exemption from LEZ, then the city will be cleaner sooner, as old vehicles are traded in for all-electric alternative. There'll be queues outside the showroom, with a largely carbon-neutral taxi fleet years before the deadline. The taxi trade is sending out the warnings now. It's a wise politician who takes heed of the experts. Sadly, their warnings continue to fall on deaf SNP-Green ears. So in the years to come, as you wait in longer taxi queues, after having trailed around the city searching for traditional Glasgow hospitality that managed to survive the cost of living and energy crises, as well as an intransigent SNP Green coalition, let's not say we weren't warned. That article was by John Daly. From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 4th of October 2022, from the comments section. Mike Daly, Communal Activism and the Story of Law Centres in Scotland. Scotland's law centre history is a remarkable story, and it's a Glasgow story. I met Paul Brown, Principal Solicitor at Legal Services Agency, LSA, at Sarty, a favourite for many Glaswegians, and opposite the old Tribunal Centre. Paul retired from LSA on Friday, after putting in a 42-year shift as a law centre solicitor. I wanted to capture and share some of his insights over those decades, as well as thank him for his remarkable and pioneering work that has helped so many people across Scotland and beyond. We started where it began for Scottish law centres, Castle Milk, 1979, the only law centre in Scotland back then. As Paul explained, I remember when the reasonableness eviction defence came from when I was at Castle Milk Law Centre. The Tenants' Rights, etc. Scotland Act 1980 had just given tenants new rights. Security of tenure was introduced to stop local authorities evicting people exercising their right to buy. I phoned Advocate Jonathan Mitchell in the early 1980s and said, we're getting all these people coming in with secure tenancies facing eviction, what can we do? He explained the reasonableness defence. No one else had identified that you could defend rent arrears and antisocial behaviour on the grounds of reasonableness. It hadn't occurred to anyone in Scotland, and the reason Jonathan knew about it was that he'd studied English private sector law, where people had indeed used reasonableness as a defence. One of the first written notes of defence in a Scottish eviction case came from Paul, appearing at Glasgow Sheriff Court before Sheriff Kenneth Mitchell. The Sheriff told him, if you're going to talk so long, you might as well do a written note of defence within 14 days. The rest was history, including recalling evictions decrees. He said, it all began with people in Castlemilk coming in saying, this is an injustice. Is there a remedy? It was making the connection between someone who knew about it and getting on with it. At that time, the Sheriff Clerk stood at the door of the court saying, go and see the Housing Department, as it was thought there was no defence in rent arrears cases. Scottish law centres emerged from the Glasgow and Clydeside community activism that can be traced to the First World War and rent strikes across the city. It was non-lawyer, community activists who demanded their working class communities get their own lawyers. And it was Glasgow City Council which was prepared to fund them, even though they'd act for tenants against them. In the 1980s, Paul wrote Dampness and the Law with Angus McIntosh from Castlemilk Law Centre. He explained to me that when the Clean Air Act provisions came into force in Glasgow, many landlords in the 1970s removed coal fires and didn't put in any other form of heating. In 1979, energy prices shot up dramatically with a drop in the supply of oil following the Iranian Revolution. Back then it was costing tenants £20 a week to heat their homes, and nobody could afford that. Glasgow law centres would go on to pursue litigation to get homes insulated, central heating systems installed, and secure social security benefits for hard-to-heat homes. In November 1989, Paul left Castlemilk to head up LSA, Scotland's second law centre, above a fish and chip shop in Glasgow's Fox Street. He hit the ground running, thanks to the close relationship with the Technical Services Agency, community activists and architects who were on his board. Paul explained how the new law centre was an instant success. What launched LSA to the public was we won a condensation dampness claim for child asthma against the council, and there was a 2-page spread about it in November 1989. That, and working closely with the Glasgow Tenants' Rights movement, meant we immediately had more work than we could manage. He reminds me how Scottish homeowners never used to be able to defend mortgage repossessions. He said, I had met a housing lawyer in London, and he was gobsmacked that Scotland had no defence for eviction of homeowners with mortgage arrears. I talked to Jim Gray at Drumchapel Law Centre, who wrote to the Scottish Minister, and she wrote back unsympathetically, and you wrote an article about it. This led to a Scottish Law Centres campaign with the former MSP Cathy Craigie introducing a members' bill that was passed in 2001 to change the law. For Paul, the future of Scottish law centres will be successful so long as they retain their fundamental principles and relationships with communities and local activists. He said, we need to stop adverse child experience, stop the threat of eviction, and stop domestic violence. He believes law centres have an essential part to play in helping to make Scotland a better country by meeting the unmet legal needs of local communities and protecting people better. This article was by Mike Daly. From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 4th of October 2022, from the news section. Plan for public control of buses in Glasgow asked to be given green light. by Stuart Patterson. Plans to set up bus franchising to take bus services into public control are being asked to be given the green light today. The franchise model would see the council, as the transport authority, have the power to regulate fares and routes across the city. Franchising is expected to cost as much as £15 million and take 7 years before it is in place. The plan falls short of a publicly owned and operated bus service, which is possible under powers in the Transport Scotland Act. It has been estimated it would cost around £200 million to set up a publicly owned bus firm in Glasgow. Instead, the SNP administration wants council officers to be given the go-ahead to begin preparing business cases for franchising. Angus Miller, the convener for Transport, said, "The SNP made clear in its manifesto for the local elections earlier this year that we wanted to explore using the incoming powers of the Transport Act to give Glaswegians the world-class bus service they deserve. But we need to make a robust business case for change and fully explore what a new model of transport delivery could look like before any decision can be taken." If committee gives officers approval to do just that, it would be the crucial first step in delivering change. In the meantime, the plan is to work with current operators to improve reliability and affordability through a bus service improvement partnership. Councillor Miller added, "At the same time as we progress towards greater public control, we recognise the need to work in partnership with operators to deliver better bus services now. Our bus governance route map sets out how we will look to take advantage of new powers in both the shorter and medium terms to secure reform and improvement for Glasgow's buses. We will now engage with all partners, including operators, the Scottish Government and Strathclyde Partnership for Transport, to take forward this important conversation on the future of Glasgow's buses together." The Council's Environment, Sustainability and Carbon Reduction Committee is being asked to approve the plans today. Currently, First Bus is the biggest operator in Glasgow. Stagecoach runs a number of regional services coming into Glasgow from neighbouring areas, and McGill's also operates several services. Get Glasgow Moving is a campaign calling for a more affordable and better connected bus network. It states, "Private bus companies across Scotland currently receive £314 million every year in public subsidies. That's 45% of their income. Yet they still get to decide which routes they run. Our money would be better spent by re-regulating the private bus companies so that our regional transport authority can plan and control the network, and by setting up a publicly owned bus company that can serve the needs of our communities and environment, not shareholders." This article was by Stuart Patterson. From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 4th of October 2022, from the news section. Police Scotland hacks thousands of phones. Exclusive by Andrew Learmonth. Thousands of Scots have had their phones hacked by Police Scotland officers looking for evidence, according to new figures uncovered by our sister title, The Herald. But nearly 3/4 of the searches have been negative. The data, obtained under Freedom of Information, shows that since the so-called cyber kiosks were first properly rolled out at the start of 2020, there have been 4,779 searches. Of those, only 1,311 have been classed as positive, just 27%. The low return has sparked questions from opposition MSPs and human rights groups. The Lib Dems said it was clear the technology was being used too routinely and extensively, and that the force needed to review how the technology is used. Cyber kiosks, or digital triage devices, are sold as Universal Forensics Extraction Devices, UFED, by the Israeli technology company Cellebrite. They were first trialled by Police Scotland in 2016 in Edinburgh and Stirling. They allow law enforcement agencies to unlock both iPhones and Android smartphones and extract most of the data on them. The devices can work even if the phones are locked and even if the data is encrypted. This allows police access to stored passwords and tokens, chats, location data, email attachments, as well as deleted content. However, the device is less effective on newer phone models. A passcode can also cause the device difficulties. It is not clear how many of the failed searches carried out by Police Scotland were because there was nothing to be found, and how many were because officers were unable to get into the phone. In April 2018, Police Scotland spent more than £444,000 on 41 cyber kiosk units from the company. The aim was to deploy them across the country within 6 months. However, that was paused after concerns were raised by MSPs and lawyers. It was only in 2020 that the Crown Office and an independent senior counsel commissioned by the force were confident that there was a legal base for use of the technology. A recent paper produced for the Scottish Police Authority explained that the kiosks helped with cases by allowing lines of inquiry to be progressed at a much earlier stage. The Herald's figures show that they were used 849 times in that first year, with 249 positive results. In 2021, there were 2,311 searches, with 611 coming back positive. The figures for this year, up until August, show that there have been 1,619 searches, with 451 proving positive. The busiest month of the last 3 years was in September 2021, when 294 searches were carried out. Any officer seeking to use a device must fill in an examination request form, ERF, which is then assessed by specialist staff in the Force's Cybercrime Gateway. The assessment concerns the necessity, legality, proportionality and justification of any examination, as well as the category and extent of information requested. One ERF can cover multiple devices, which could mean that the real figures are far greater than those provided. In response to our Freedom of Information request, Police Scotland also confirmed that there had been no evaluations of the devices. Scottish Liberal Democrat spokesperson for Justice, Liam MacArthur, said, "Scottish Liberal Democrats were not alone in raising serious concerns about the legality and way in which this technology was put into use by Police Scotland with few, if any, safeguards. While steps were subsequently taken to apply greater safeguards, this FOI suggests that cyber kiosks are being used routinely and extensively. Yet it is also clear that such searches do not turn up evidence relevant to investigations all that often. In order to maintain public confidence, it will be important for Police Scotland to continue to keep under review how the technology is used and where further improvements might be made." Last year, the CEO of the messaging app Signal said he hacked a cyber kiosk and discovered a series of vulnerabilities which would allow someone to plant code on a phone that would take over Cellbright's hardware. They claimed this would allow them to silently affect all future investigations and also rewrite the data the tools had saved from previous analyses. In September, a court ruling in Maryland forced Baltimore Police Department to stop using the cyber kiosks over concerns that it breached the Fourth Amendment, which protects US citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. Nevertheless, Cellbright's UFEDs remain popular with governments and law enforcement agencies across the world. When Kaylee Haywood, a 15-year-old girl from Measham, Leicestershire, disappeared in 2015, police were able to use a device to access her tablet and her phone. They discovered a number of messages between her groomer, Luke Harlow, which led then to her murderer, Stephen Beardman. This article was by Andrew Learmonth.
From Glasgow Evening Times, Wednesday, the 5th of October 2022. From the news section. Food bank in Glasgow's East End to run free kids club this October break. By Morgan Carmichael. A Glasgow food bank will host a free kids club this October break to provide financial relief to families across the city. The Everlasting Food Bank will be running its Kids Holiday Cafe from Tuesday, October 18th to Friday, October 21st following a successful summer edition earlier this year. Yika Ugunuki, treasurer and current chairperson of the Everlasting Food Bank, said, "With this venture, we hope to inspire change. As members of the community, it is essential that we band together to make a difference. The cafe gives us the opportunity to tailor to some of the most vulnerable members of our community, our youth. The Kids Holiday Cafe will provide free lunches and dinners to youngsters aged between 5 and 12, as well as activities, games, and special trips. In previous years, the kids visited Glasgow Science Centre, baked cupcakes, and went to the park. The Holiday Cafe is entirely free, following donations from Glasgow City Council." Miss Ogunuki said, "The food and activities provided by the Kids Holiday Cafe sees an average of 50 plus children fed with balanced lunches and dinners and occupied with fun, educational activities. It is an opportunity to garner friendships, learn new skills, and partake in nutritious meals with no financial impact on their parents. However, the cafe is designed to support the family as a whole, not just children." Miss Ogunuki stated that the Everlasting Food Bank's ventures is to provide financial relief to families in need, but also to support parents by reducing the pressure for them to provide during the holidays. The East End Food Bank hopes to make a positive impact on the community with the venture. Ms. Ogunuki said, "We want to continually make an impact in the community by catering to essential needs. It is crucial that our children have access to nutritional meals and programs that mentor and encourage continued academic and social growth. So we are extremely excited to host the 2022 fall edition of this venture." The Kids Holiday Cafe will take place at 12 Whitehill Street in Denniston between 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. from October 18th to October 21st. And that article was by Morgan Carmichael. From Glasgow Evening Times, Wednesday, the 5th of October 2022. From the news section. Glasgow's Royal Hospital for Children Neonatal Unit receives Bliss Charity Gold Award. By Sarah Campbell. A neonatal unit in Glasgow has become the first in Scotland to receive a prestigious gold award for its works. Yesterday, the unit at Glasgow's Royal Hospital for Children, RHC, was officially awarded gold accreditation from the Bliss Baby Charter in recognition of its dedication to family-centred care. Staff at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital-based site were visited by Minister of Public Health, Marie Todd, who presented them with the award. Ms. Todd said, "The unit is leading the way in delivering family-focused care as outlined in the Best Start, our strategy for maternity and neonatal care, and the achievement of the Bliss Baby Charter Gold accreditation is a great achievement. The presentation of today's award reflects the immensely important contribution you all provide for the parents and the babies in your care." Bliss is a UK-based charity for babies who are born prematurely or with sickness, which seeks to support the families of those in need of neonatal care. The RHSC's neonatal unit was praised by the charity for its positive approach to collecting feedback from families of patients, which has allowed them to continuously develop their approach to the service they provide. Caroline Lee Davey, Chief Executive of Bliss Scotland, said, "The culture of the Royal Hospital for Children Neonatal Unit is clearly family-centred, with families referencing an extremely welcoming environment with supportive staff who are always keen to listen and encourage parents to be involved in their baby's care, which is vital to babies having the best possible outcomes. We are thrilled to award the unit with the first Gold Baby Charter accreditation in Scotland. It's an amazing achievement which the whole team should be proud of." After accepting the award, Ansley Blantyre, Senior Charge Nurse at the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow, said, "We are delighted for everyone across the team to be recognised by Bliss Baby Charter for the continued hard work. The whole team are so passionate about providing the highest standard of family-centred care, and this award further highlights this approach while recognising how much hard work the team has been putting in. With the challenges the last couple of years, it's a real moral boost for the staff to see how much their efforts are being recognised and appreciated. And that article was by Sarah Campbell. From Glasgow Evening Times, Wednesday, the 5th of October 2022. From the news section. New law will make it illegal to supply fireworks to under 18s. By Stuart Patterson. New laws will make it illegal to supply fireworks to anyone under the age of 18. It will also introduce a new rule that means attacking emergency crews using fireworks will be an aggravating factor, taking into account when courts sentence people for those offences. The law comes into effect on Monday ahead of Bonfire Night this year, intended to make communities safer around November 5th. Every year, fire crews come under attack when trying to deal with unsafe bonfires, and police and ambulance crews also face the same threat. Chief Inspector Nicola Robinson from Police Scotland's Partnership, Preventions and Community Wellbeing Division said the law was welcome. She said buying fireworks for underage youths can result in a £5,000 fine, 6 months imprisonment, or both, and our message is clear. Do not risk it. Help us prevent disorder, damage and violence over the bonfire night period. On the law to protect crews from attack, she added, the new aggravator for attacks on emergency service workers is also a welcome legislative change and should give all frontline first responders additional reassurance that their safety and well-being is paramount as they go about their duties. The Scottish Government said it will lead to greater public safety around Bonfire Night. Ash Regan, Community Safety Minister, said fireworks in the wrong hands can cause serious life-changing injuries or even prove fatal. Preventing their supply in any way to under 18s is a wholly welcome step, which will bring great public safety across Scotland. On attacks on crews, she added, any attack on fire, ambulance and police crew is utterly despicable to ensuring courts, as required, to take into consideration the use of fireworks or pyrotechnics as a possible aggravating factor in any attack on 999 crews is a real deterrent to such vile behaviour. Work in progressing to see other provisions set out in the groundbreaking legislation brought into force. These are essential steps and demonstrate our absolute commitment to improving the safety of communities across Scotland. And that article was by Stuart Patterson.
And that was this week's Glasgow Times news podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.